Good evening. This is your host, Lonnie Clark, with the Age of Fission radio show. I am doing a dual recording again this week for KEPW 97.3 FM LP, serving Eugene and Springfield and the surrounding areas. It is a certified 501c3 nonprofit. I thought I'd throw that in there. You can also listen to KEPW live streaming at www.kepw.org. Anyways, I wanted to come to you live again this week because last week I reported on the bills that were in the House and in the Senate in the state of legislature of Oregon. And I did some research. There are nuclear bills of some sort in most legislatures, some dealing with new nuclear licenses, some with the problems that they have ongoing. And I didn't really pick any states to talk to you about, but I would honestly urge everyone to get to know your state legislature's website and research and take a look and find out what bills are being proposed. And actively engage, because we only have democracy if we get involved, and we're learning that lesson. We're coming up on 10 years on the Fukushima disaster accident, and frankly, it's completely amazing, but people think that it's cleaned up. And that's because the governments are lying to them. I mean, what we're going through in our nation is coming because the President of the United States is a perpetual liar. And, he wants to start the new Confederacy. But, and it's kind of like that in the nuclear industry. They don't give a crap about what we think about and what we're doing. I mean, they will keep putting in these bills, even though, and I actually did some research because I wanted to look at the nuclear alerts that were going on, at the nuclear power facilities, that's being reported by the NRC. And it's the usual. Up in Cooper in Nebraska today was reported that there was 3 spikes where it went way above and then it came down, way above and came down. And then the nuclear alert basically said, but don't worry, we fixed it. There's no reason we don't know. We're investigating why it happened. That makes you feel good, right? So I thought I'd bring to you some news about what really is going on in the nuclear industry, what they're doing to us, like at a state level, which is really shocking. And I hope most of you will listen to Libby Halevi's radio show, Nuclear Hot Seat. And I think on the KEPW website, I'm not sure if you can find it there. But if you miss it on KEPW, they play it, I think, at 7:30 in the morning on Saturdays. So if you're in Eugene and Springfield, please listen to it this week again. She is interviewing Carl Grossman, who is discussing at length the nuclear industry's proposal. They're considering extending licenses for nuclear power facilities around the country, which were built to last 40 years, mind you. They've already extended most of them out to 60 years, some to 80, and now they're talking about extending them for 100 years. We're talking about a nuclear power facility being built and allowed to run for 100 years. Because the real reason? Because when they close them down, they are nothing but a taxpayer burden. In the meantime, they get to make a boatload of people rich because they get to suck our blood through every single electricity bill that goes on in this country, whether we want nuclear or not. Like in Oregon, for example, we have 4% of the nuclear power from the Columbia Generating Station, which is its own disaster in the waiting, only 11 miles away from the Hanford nuclear site, sitting on top of several active earthquake faults that are overdue, the geologists say, by 100 years for a 9.0 or greater earthquake. So put those two together and see what you get. I mean, it is completely outrageous. So I thought I'd talk to you about that because this is something that we really, there's comments that you can make on the nuclear, on the website at the NRC. Go to the NRC website and, you know, they are considering the nuclear reactors to have them open for 100 years. Carl Grossman's he's written articles on it. You know, he's quite the expert about this. So this is going to look odd, you guys, for my viewers on YouTube who are watching me on the video. I'm going to put a second pair of glasses on so I can read my computer screen because I'm scrolling down this article. He was interviewed by Sputnik, Professor Grossman was, about this very topic. And he talks about what's going to happen is they're going to become embrittled. You know, they are going to become embrittled and they're going to become completely blanketed. It says, why do you think that embrittled reactors are at the top of the list of nuclear power concerns? There are numerous major concerns regarding nuclear power plants, but embrittlement is at the top because nuclear power plants in the U.S. were never seen as operating beyond 40 years. So we have embrittlement in lots of these power plants. Lots of them. That's what he was talking about earlier in this article, is the embrittlement. I mean, an average length of operation of a nuclear power plant in the U.S. reported to the government in 2019 was 38 years. Now in 2021, they say the nuclear average age is 40 years. So they're inching it up, right? So this is the thing. Meanwhile, the U.S. government, in the form of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, has in recent years been extending operating licenses of nuclear power plants to 60 and 80 years and is presently considering extending allowed lengths of operation to 100 years. This is completely catastrophic. We cannot let this happen. In fact, what we really need to do, anybody who's listening to this radio show or to this podcast, we need to really lean in and constantly harass our elected officials about whenever they can, we want to shut down nuclear. We do not want nuclear in any form, and we need all the nuke plants to shut down because they are all a catastrophe in waiting, as is, boom, I'm going to show you another article. So hold on. There's another art. I have 3 articles sort of teed up here. And I kind of want to delay the groundwork for that because listen to this one. This is hilarious. This came out 22 hours ago. Workers repaired the wrong pump at the nuclear power plant. They're only discovering it now. It was done. The work was done in 2018. This was at the Florida power plant in Florida Power and Turkey Point. It was at the Turkey Point power plant. And that was, that's the one on the, I think it's the west coast of Florida, right? It's right there. And it's actually, boom, right down the street from Key West, to be honest. It's really in a dangerous spot. But they found a very serious issue. And in fact, what they did, the recently issued NRC report pinpoints to an incident stemming from July 10, 2019, when 2 Florida power plant, what are they called? FLP. What's FLP? Oh, Florida Power and Light. When 2 Florida Power and Light employed technicians were assigned to work on a nuclear generating Unit 4C charging pump oil pressure switch, but instead worked on its twin Westinghouse AP1000 Unit 3C charging pump oil pressure switch, which ultimately caused the Unit 3C charging pump to trip. Ding! The purpose of the investigation was to determine whether the 2 long-term instrumentation and control technicians at Turkey Point deliberately provided incompetent or inaccurate information in maintenance records, or whether they, the supervisor, and the department head deliberately failed to immediately notify the main control room of the mispositioned plant component as required by the plant procedure. Both apparent violations are being considered for escalated enforcement, according to the NRC. So check this out. When I read this, I could not believe it. They're reporting on something 2019, July. So that's like a year and a half ago, and they're just now deliberating. They're kind of thinking it over still about whether they intentionally lied on their reports about such a serious matter. To me, I'm nonplussed at the lackadaisical attitude of the catastrophe in waiting, which gets back to kind of my point about Fukushima. Like, we're all just, oh yeah, they got bags of dirt over there. Yeah, their food's probably not very good. We gotta watch what we eat from over there. I mean, like I said in Libby Halevi, the interview I did with Libby Halevi, I'm nonplussed that now that people know, they're just not like up in arms over this. Like these people in Florida, if you're in Florida, you need to lean into this on your elected officials in the NRC because, I mean, this could actually really destroy the whole Gulf Coast, to be honest, and it probably has. I don't know if you guys listen to Guy McPherson. He has a podcast called Nature Bats Last, but it's kind of a doomer thing. I guess they call us doomers because we listen to science. But he's a biologist who says basically our water pollution is going to cause severe water shortages and food shortages within the next 10 to 15 years. And he gives a shorter time frame, much shorter than that, but I won't talk to you about it because that even freaks me out what he talks about. He's like, oh, by 2050 he thinks we're going to all, billions of people are going to be dead. Well, I'm the eternal optimist and I'm not going to believe that. So listen to this. FPL spokesman Peter Robinson said the Turkey Point workers were dismissed and the utility does not compromise when it comes to safety. Right, they've been fired, which means they're somewhere else lying about things. As soon as we became aware of the situation, we conducted a thorough investigation. I wonder when they were fired. But they want to make sure that you know that nobody was in danger ever. They are stressing that. At no point, so don't worry, we're working on it. Nothing's more important than the safe operation of the plant, and I hope that's true. I hope they really believe that. But the sad part is, I mean, every single nuclear facility, that's their number one directive, right? So, I don't know if you guys remember this story that I talked about. Oh my gosh, it must be 2 years. I know on KEPW, I actually researched this quite a bit. Do you remember when President Trump reclassified the high-level nuclear waste that's in Hanford and as low-level waste? And the idea, Ann White, who worked for this company in this story on West Texas that I'm about to talk to you, Rick Perry, there's a man named Gene Simmons. He owns a waste facility site, and he basically lobbied and got Rick Perry elected governor. He gave him $1 million in 2003, I think, and he also contributed like $250,000 to Donald Trump's campaign. 250 to 350. They couldn't quite tell because Trump was a compulsive liar. They couldn't tell the truth that they tried, so that nobody could tell which it was. And then Ann White was the secretary for the owner, this guy, Gene Simmons. I think that's his name. I'll double check it as we read the story. But she wrote the legislation that allowed the nuclear industry up in Hanford, the Department of Energy. It's not even the NRC. It's not the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So let me take a minute here and cut this in half and explain that for those of you that don't understand. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is really about the private use, and the DOE oversees, the Department of Energy oversees the nuclear inside the government-owned nuclear waste, which honestly doesn't make sense to me that we have them all separated out like this, because it's all one big gigantic thing. So, but anyways, Ann White wrote this legislation for Donald Trump, and basically once he agreed to sign it, she left the job. So that's why she was there, right? So she rewrote the legislation that said the nuclear waste up in Hanford or at any of the Manhattan Project sites, because they were nuclear waste made for war, didn't really classify as high level waste, that we could, because it was so old, we could consider. And it wasn't just that much. That was the other thing. It was like 100 million gallons of nuclear waste. And because it wasn't that much, they could consider it low level waste, and we could move it above ground with very low protections like we're supposed to do, and just buried in these little shallow graves down in West Texas. That guy is going to get a lot of money. And so this article that I found, it's in the Texas Tribune, and I'm going to put my glasses on again for those, but you know, my YouTube followers, you guys know me. You've seen me do this. I've read whole books wearing 2 pairs of glasses. So this article is titled, West Texas is on track to get even more nuclear waste thanks to the federal government. Actually, they should say thanks to Donald Trump, not the federal government, for real. Because it's not just the federal government. It is specifically because Donald Trump was president. This is dated February 10th, 2021. And actually, I'm going to read this article. I believe we have time. Let me double check how much time we have here. We definitely have time. I'm going to read this because this is well worth hearing. And this guy did a lot of good research. And it was written by Aaron Douglas. And I have no idea whether that's male or female, but that's their name. And let me make this bigger even, so I don't have to get too close. Boink. There we go. Okay. To get rid of 8 gallons of water, the U.S. Department of Energy spent $100,000. It's more than half a tank of gasoline in a mid-sized car. But the radioactive shipment from South Carolina to West Texas Company last fall marked one change that could lead to more nuclear waste traveling to Texas. Waste that until recently was considered too dangerous to dispose of. Much of the public debate surrounding waste control specialists' hazardous waste facility in Andrew County on the New Mexico border has focused on the company's plant with a partner to store the riskiest type of nuclear waste, the spent fuel rods from nuclear power plants, which can remain dangerously radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists agree that spent nuclear fuel should be stored deeply underground, but the U.S. still hasn't located a suitable site. Interim Storage Partners, a joint venture of Waste Control Specialists and Orano USA, a subsidiary of one of the world's largest nuclear power companies, proposed bringing the spent fuel to a 332-acre site next to the UCS facility in Andrews County until a permanent storage site is found. So WCS is Waste Control Specialist, just so that you, in case you guys, I don't remember these acronyms myself. If the plan succeeds, it would be a big expansion for Waste Control Specialists, which has been disposing of the nation's low-level nuclear waste, including tools, building materials, and protective clothing exposed to radioactivity for a decade. Interim Storage Partners website says it expects to get the federal approval for spent nuclear fuel storage, a major step in the plan, this year. Not if we have anything to do about it. The idea still faces significant legal hurdles and stiff opposition from environmental groups, local oil companies, some residents, and Governor Greg Abbott, who wrote the federal regulators last year asking them to deny the license application, stating that the proposal presents a greater radiological risk than Texas is prepared to allow. The government and the companies involved say radioactive spills during transportation or storage that expose people and the environment to radiation are very unlikely to occur. But opponents fear human error, mechanical failures, or geological changes that could result in groundwater contamination. You think? But while the slow-moving plan is wrapped in political turmoil, lower profile changes and proposals from federal agencies are giving waste control specialists another avenue to accept more radioactive waste than it does today. The wastewater that traveled from an old South Carolina nuclear weapons facility more than 1,000 miles in 3 truckloads in late September was an example. It was the first shipment made after a 2019 U.S. Department of Energy decision to reinterpret how different levels of radioactive waste are classified, allowing it to be disposed of at a commercial facility. The decision to let the DOE categorize waste based on its properties and hazard level rather than how it was created, and allows radioactive waste from nuclear weapon productions and government-sponsored nuclear energy research to be shipped to commercial sites such as the one in Texas, rather than indefinitely stored at a government site. Wow. They did this 8 gallons of a sort test, said Tom Clements, the director of the Savannah River Site Watch, an advocacy group that monitors the DOE's site in South Carolina, a nuclear national security complex where materials for nuclear weapons were produced until 1991 at the end of the Cold War. Wow. It is the foot to the door. It is the foot in the door to taking in more materials. I have to get a little bit closer, you guys. I really apologize for that. It's what happens when you have limited sight. Let's get back to that. Let me reread that sentence because that flipped me out. They did this 8 gallons of a sort test, said Tom Clements. Tom Clements, director of Savannah River Site Watch, an advocacy group that monitors the DOE site in South Carolina, a nuclear national security complex where materials for nuclear weapons were produced until 1991 at the end of the Cold War. It is the foot in the door to taking more material to WCS. Exactly. And the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission is also considering new rules that could give waste control specialists a green light to pursue bringing more dangerous radioactive waste to its commercial facility than currently allowed by state law. Get that? The NRC is thinking about overriding the will of the voters and the legislature. This is why people in Texas need to get engaged, man. Actually, Texas has this is why you got the representation. This is why they do it there, because nobody gets engaged. The company is already permitted to accept low-level nuclear waste in Andrews County. The plan to build a facility to store spent nuclear fuel, the most dangerous kind, would bring what's considered high-level nuclear waste. In addition, NRC staff recommended in October that the agency consider allowing commercial facilities like WCS to accept materials that fall into a third danger level between those 2 categories. The floodgates may be opening in Texas, Clements said. That is exactly what many environmentalists and local opponents feared after the hazardous waste facility was built in 1995. At the time, a company official told the community that it had no plans to expand to radioactive waste disposal. Of course, anybody related to nuclear, you have to be a liar just to be involved in the industry. This is one of the difficulties of a community or a state agreeing to one type of waste facility, because it can be changed on you, said Rodney Ewing, a scientist and professor of nuclear security at Stanford University. If it's judged to be safe, that becomes the rationale for accepting more waste. Waste control specialists and interim storage partners executives repeatedly declined, through a spokesperson, to provide interviews or comment for this story, referring instead to the company's fact sheets. That's because they don't want to answer any questions, those rats. On their websites, the companies emphasize their commitment to safety and the environment. WCS states on a media sheet that the company, quote, has an extensive monitoring program to ensure the safety of the community and the environment at all times, unquote. The nuclear power industry prides itself on operating no-emission plants without burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas, which create the greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. By locating in the Permian Basin, one of the most productive oil fields in the world, Waste Control Specialists has found itself in a political fight against fossil fuel interests that its customers often compete with. Elaine Magruder is a co-owner of an Andrews County ranch where her family has raised cattle and pumped oil since 1893, I'm sorry. She's also a member of a coalition of Permian Basin landowners and oil operators that oppose radioactive waste storage and disposal in Andrews County. The coalition is led by Fasken Oil and Ranch, which owns thousands of acres in Andrews County. Magruder says she's worried that a transportation accident could expose local residents to radioactive materials and disrupt oil and gas operations. Ding, 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 ding. She gets a gold star. She also worries that a leak at the facility could allow radioactive material to seep into the ground, contaminating area drinking water. Another gold star, ma'am. The facility is near the Ogallala Aquifer of the Great Plains, which provides drinking water for millions in the West. So you get that? Let me keep going. This is a great article. The oil and gas industry has supported our families and communities for all this time, Magruder said. What has to be considered is short-term economic gain for long-term disastrous risk. It has the risk of harming our whole Permian Basin area. But Andrews County Judge Charlie Falcon said he supports the facility's expansion plans. He believes that the majority of the county's 18,700 residents don't object to Waste Control Specialists' operation, which employs 110 people and pumps around $1 million annually into the county's coffers through a 5% fee on all disposal activity. This is why he's for it. An amount that would likely increase if the facility allowed to accept more radioactive waste. WCS has paid $13.4 million in fees to Andrew County since 2012. Another $59.3 million has gone to the state. Wow. Most people do not have a problem with the waste facility out there, said Falcon. WCS, the company, are great corporate partners with the county and the schools. They do their part. Yeah, they'll do their part until there's an accident. And then all they'll do is say, it's on you. A Department of Energy review of nuclear waste shipments worldwide found that there have been few transportation accidents involving spent nuclear fuel, and most were minor, according to the analysis. And as for the radioactive waste, the DOE in a statement said it safely ships hazardous waste via routes that minimize radiological risk. I'll comment on that in a minute. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has found in a 2014 assessment that federal regulations are adequate to ensure public safety during transportation of nuclear waste, and that the chance of radioactive release during an accident is very small. Ewing, a Stanford University nuclear security professor, said the larger risk is environmental contamination due to the facility's proximity to the aquifer, a concern that some of the other nuclear scientists and geologists. This unlikely alliance of environmental groups and oil companies has Abbott on its side. In November, the governor sent a letter urging the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to deny the application for storing spent nuclear fuel in Andrews County, arguing in part that the proposed facility imperils America's energy security by making the region an even greater possible terrorism target than it is today due to its oil and gas reserves. That is probably very true. Waste control specialists and its partners point to the area's geological characteristics as the prime reason why the site is one of the safest places in the nation to put nuclear waste. The facility sits atop an impermeable 600-foot thick red clay formation. Clay absorbs nuclear waste. And according to a Department of Energy environmental assessment, the hazardous and radioactive waste is buried in the clay and encapsulated in a robust liner and cover system that prevent leaks and spills. Right, robust like they did up at Hanford. Remember that story, guys? About 6 years ago, or when it came out, I guess it was 6 or 7 years ago. They've discovered 40 miles of trenches that were supposed to be triple lined, and the nuclear waste was supposed to just be poured in and spread out. Well, what Halliburton did, which is why they're not called Halliburton, they had to close that company and restart it when it got discovered. They built 40 miles of trenches, didn't line it, didn't empty the waste. They just dumped the canisters in there, and it's been rotting there since '82. It's created one of the biggest messes up in Hanford. So yeah, encapsulated in a robust liner and cover system to prevent leaks and seals. Wow. Falcon, the county judge, said he sees radioactive waste as a buffer against the inevitable ups and downs of cyclical oil and gas industry. Because the radioactive waste, they'll always have money. So the oil and gas industry basically will be up and down. So this is his go-to thing. Let's store the waste so we'll have that money. If that is to dry up and go away, especially with the new administration that opposes gas and oil, we don't have a whole lot of resources here for economic diversification, he said. So let's bring in the waste. Oh my God. There's 18,000 people there. What about farming? I mean, what about bringing in industry to do stuff? God dang. Waste control specialist Nuclear Waste Pursuit was the brainchild of now deceased Dallas billionaire Harold Simmons. His name wasn't Gene Simmons. I'm sorry, you guys. Harold Simmons, who slowly took over the company in the early 2000s as he became more invested in what was then a small hazardous waste disposal business in Andrews County. Long before Simmons' takeover, Waste Control Specialists was quoted in Andrews County in 1995 stating that the facility, quote, would not take radioactive materials, nuclear waste, medical waste, explosives of any liquids, unquote. That's what they said. This is why the people in Andrews County allowed them to come in. But the company's new owners soon began lobbying the Texas legislature for permission to accept low-level nuclear waste at the facility. Simmons' clout at the Capitol. He was a major donor to then Governor Rick Perry, major by $1 million. That's what my research proved. Even so, getting the permits for low-level nuclear waste, which typically... Hold on just a second. I need to clear my throat. Okay, let me finish that. Let me get back to this. Gee whiz. He was a major donor to then Governor Rick Perry. Even so, getting the permits for low-level nuclear waste, which typically includes a wide range of contaminated items such as radioactive gloves, shoe covers, and medical tubes, took years of political maneuvering. First, the Texas legislature passed a bill making it legal for private companies to dispose of low-level nuclear waste in Texas, a bill that Perry signed into law in 2003. That sparked an intense effort to block the plans for low-level nuclear waste at the site by environmental groups and landowners who raised concerns over water contamination, transportation accidents, and increased terrorist threat to the region. Glenn Schenkel, the then executive director of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, recommended that the site be permitted to dispose of low-level nuclear waste, defying some of the agency's scientists who said nearby groundwater could be at risk. A few TCEQ staff members resigned over the nuclear waste proposal. Among them, Patricia Bobeck, a geologist who said she was pressured by higher-ups to find a way to approve the permit, despite her professional opinion that the geology of the area was at high risk of corrosion that could increase the chance of environmental contamination. Bobeck said she retired from government rather than have that permit shoved down my throat. Wow. The director, Schenkel, later took a job as a lobbyist for waste control specialists. Wow. This is shocking. I read this, but as I'm reading it, it just still hits me, man. Today, Elizabeth Padilla, a school teacher in Andrews and mother of 4, who opposes the facility because she worries it could pose health risks to her family, points to the 1993 Andrews County News article as proof of what she calls a broken promise to the community. The people of Andrews gave them an inch, and they're wanting to take miles and miles, said Padilla. They just can't have enough. Welcome to the nuclear industry. Even after getting permission to expand into nuclear waste, the company had high costs and not enough demand. Some nuclear energy industry experts theorize that expensive commercial nuclear waste facilities like WCS overestimated the amount of low-level nuclear waste that would need disposal to power plant operators became more efficient. Wow. Simmons died in 2013, and WCS, in financial distress, was acquired in 2018 by J.F. Lehman and Company, a New York private equity firm that specializes in defense, maritime, environment, and government industries. Wow. By then, Donald Trump had become president and tapped Perry to head the Department of Energy, which is charged with finding a long-term solution to the nation's high-level nuclear waste. Much of it stored across the nation on-site at power plants where it was created and at DOE sites for lack of anywhere else to put it. In 2019, DOE In 2019, the DOE reinterpreted. Thank you. This is why I'm live entertainment for myself, you guys. The DOE reinterpreted how it classified different levels of nuclear waste, basing each level on radioactivity rather than how it was created. It was a change that experts convened by the Secretary of Energy recommended in order to modernize the nuclear waste disposal process. Yeah, the Secretary of Energy which was Ann Wright. They hired Ann Wright to write this legislation, and she worked for Howard Simmons. Or Harry Simmons. I guess his name was Harry Simmons. For example, some high-level waste was classified that way because it was created during weapons production, not because it was as long-lasting or dangerous as spent nuclear fuel. By reclassifying some of the government's nuclear waste to lower level, the DOE could move it to commercial facilities for disposal, including WCS's Texas facility, and save the federal government more than $200 billion in waste storage and maintenance cost. The DOE estimated in a December report to Congress that is going to end up being a big fat lie. Not everyone agreed with the new interpretation. The state of Washington, which is tangled with the federal government for years over contamination from a decommissioned nuclear complex, that's called Hanford, opposed the reinterpretation, concerned that the federal government would erroneously label dangerous waste as low level. Others criticized the DOE for failing to publicly reveal how much waste could be reclassified or would be reclassified. They didn't describe how much waste there would be or how much they would handle, or how they would handle it, said Don Hancock, an attorney and director of the Nuclear Waste Safety Program at the Southwest Research and Information Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My expectation is that the DOE itself doesn't exactly know how much is in South Carolina that it wants to send to WCS. The DOE did not provide an estimate of how much nuclear waste the new interpretation would apply to, but stated that no decisions on implementation have been made beyond the 8-gallon shipment to Texas. The agency said using the new classification for the waste enables the department to better address one of our nation's largest environmental challenges by allowing waste to be stored at DOE sites for decades. A new path for disposal. And let me read that again. I think I messed it up. The agency said, using the new classification for waste enables the department to better address one of our nation's largest environmental challenges by allowing waste that has been stored at DOE sites for decades a new path for disposal. Meaning, let's dump it off on the public and let some private contractor gouge us for billions of dollars and have no accountability. Meanwhile, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission may soon consider new regulations that would allow WCS and other commercial sites to accept a higher level of nuclear waste than Texas currently allows. The WCS facility is permitted to accept Class A, B, and C nuclear waste, categories that fall below high-level material like spent nuclear fuel. But certain material, much of it generated by the decommissioning of nuclear power plants, falls into what experts call a gray area between lower-level categories and spent nuclear fuel. It has an equally ambiguous name, greater than Class C. Okay then, not D, but greater than Class C. Oh my gosh. You gotta laugh. The waste represents an opportunity for disposal companies, industry observers said, as more nuclear power plants are decommissioned in favor of cheaper natural gas power plants or renewable sources like wind and solar. Not if they can help it. They're talking about the 100-year license, you guys. They're going to wait for them to melt down before they shut them down. Back to this article. We only have a few more paragraphs left, so we're near the end. I want to thank everybody for continuing to listen. The greater than C class waste is currently considered high level, meaning it can only be slated for ultra-secure underground storage in a permanent repository that the U.S. government has vetted to create. In the meantime, it's mostly stored where it was created. But in a 2014 request by waste control specialists set off But a 2014 request by waste control specialists set off a discussion at the NRC on whether these new guidelines for the greater than Class C waste should be created. Because Texas law prevents commercial sites from accepting it, WCS asked state regulators to change the rules. The TCEQ needed to clarify with the federal government whether it was even allowed to regulate such high-level materials. Now the NRC is looking at that possibility. The NRC staff recommended in October that the commission consider rules to allow commercial sites to accept this category of waste, concluding that 80% of greater than Class C waste could be safely disposed at the facilities like WCS's rather than deep underground. I wonder how they found that out. Staff wrote that the rule would be a quicker solution to waste otherwise trapped on site, waiting for a permanent home that has yet to be materialized, and that the materials are not hazardous, that they only should be managed, that the materials that are not so hazardous that they should only be managed by the federal government. Some experts, however, are skeptical of changing the rules. Bob Alvarez, a nuclear waste expert and senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies, said he believes this category of waste is dangerous enough for long enough that it should be isolated in a geological repository like the proposed Yucca Mountain site facility in Nevada. These are some of the most dangerous materials in the world, Alvarez said. It's not cotton candy. But even if NRC commissioners change rules to allow state-level oversight, it may not help WCS advance its plans. Abbott is opposed to bringing the greater than C class waste to Texas, according to his letter to the NRC. David McIntyre, a spokesperson for the NRC, said it's not clear when agency commissioners will make a decision on the staff recommendations. Opponents of the proposal say either way, the company's efforts to get permission to handle waste represents another attempt to boost its profits by taking more dangerous waste. It's an effort over many years to make it look less threatening and to sneak it in as less hazardous, said Karen Haddon, the executive director of Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Coalition, a sustainable energy alliance of business and organizations. Waste control specialists continues down this path of ever expanding their radioactive empire. I have to say that article really stunned me. I mean, there is a lot to unpack in that article. So let me read it to you again and tell you where you can find it, because it is worth reading. It was printed in the TexasTribune.org, and it was on 2 days ago, or a few days ago, February 10th, I think I said, 2021, by Aaron Douglas, and that is at the TexasTribune.org. So that's where you can find it, and inside that article there's a bunch of links too. But the reason I wanted to read that article to you after kind of rambling on about all these different ideas, it's the same thing. The nuclear industry does not give up. In our state, they're trying to put these stupid bills. They've got them in committee. I think they're going to die in committee. We've had people calling up and telling them we want them to die in committee. They're not on the calendar, so hopefully they'll stay dead. I'm going to be like white on rice on the calendar now. I'm going to look at the March, April, May. I think they only go till June, though. But I'm going to really pay attention to the calendar. And everybody in their own state needs to do the same thing, just like in Texas. These people, this is where they've been targeted. This guy, Harold Simmons, literally, he spent several $1 million working on this, just in lobbying funds. And we don't need to make these hurried rush judgments about nuclear waste. This is grave. We can't undo what happened at Hanford when they had those 40-mile trenches of nuclear waste. Has created a catastrophe that has literally tripled the cost for the state of Washington to fix that area, if at a minimum tripled the cost. And they're having to dig underground. It's a very expensive project, but what they're planning on doing is digging underground and lining it beneath the trench, like they've been removing it. Who knows what they're really doing, but you can just imagine it just becomes a catastrophic waste. So I want to encourage everyone to stay on top of it and remember that the nuclear industry doesn't forget about you. And they look at us, they look at the federal government like our tax dollars is their money. And we have a huge problem with not addressing the nuclear industry waste. And I actually think we need to change the conversation. So anyways, before I end out here, you guys, I really want to get a message. I have these cards by John Holland, and they are called Spirit Messages. So I really just want to pull a card or two on giving us some guidance from Spirit before I close out and say goodnight to everybody. And I really appreciate you listening to me. And please take action. Don't let it slide. You don't have to do it all the time. And don't let it get to you. Because guess what? We're all going to die. So what is your message to all of us? Here it is. New beginnings. Everything in life is constantly vibrating and moving, and therefore continuously changing and evolving. Be aware that a new beginning is on the horizon. Have courage and faith, because right now, life is trying to nudge you forward in a new direction. Let me look in this little booklet, because that's only the first paragraph. New beginnings. I love this book because it's, uplifting. This powerful card comes forward and his message is simple, yet it could have a profound effect on your future. It is about the process of how to start over and seize the opportunity to create new beginnings. You may well be saying, I can't do this. It's not the right time. I'm too old to start all over again. But the spirit world is giving you this card for a specific reason. We know that you need to make changes, to discard some old legacies that have held you back, and to purge and choose what you want moving forward. We know that doing nothing is not really an option. New beginnings can be orchestrated at any time in your life, and it's a beautiful way of resetting your own private stage with the props you want, the backdrop you want, and create the perfect set for the next stage of your life. This is a great visual way of starting the process of change. During this time, don't be alarmed if you feel lost or even confused. Sometimes it does take a drastic life change to truly begin living. So I'm going to end there, you guys. I think that's a great message. We do need to change. We need to change how we face these catastrophes. And I think we even need to change what we tell ourselves about it. And this is why I don't call myself a doomer, because we only live in the present. The present is a gift, and it is up to us what we choose to do with it. And we have these big challenges about nuclear waste, but it's really important for us to embrace the fact that it's here, and it's part of us, and it's part of who we're going to be. How we're going to manage it and be good stewards of it is of utmost importance, and we can't just let them go dumping it in the middle of the Texas desert. So I hope everybody gets involved on this effort and tell them to leave it where it is until they figure something out. Anyways, you guys, this is Lonnie Clark, and you've been listening to The Age of Fission on 97.3 FM LP, serving Eugene and Springfield and the surrounding areas. LP means low power, so sometimes it doesn't reach out into the mountain areas, but you can always listen to us at www.kepw.org and go to the drop-down menu and look at the schedule. It's really a great radio station. I can't say enough about the programming. Anyways, I always like to say, put your courage feet on, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Ciao. Figure out how to turn this off. There we go.